Ready to continue? We are at vectors and matrices. So let's think about vectors first. Up to this point, we're looking at variables that contain single numbers. But more often than not, they are more complex, containing multiple values. And those multiple values can be structured in different ways. And we're going to start with how you structure variables as vectors. For example, the variable stats_total may contain the number of students from 2010 to 2020. Here's how we would create that. I don't know what's going on with the video, so I think I'm just going to get rid of it and not worry about it, and we'll continue to go over the assignment. You just hear my voice. I'll try and figure out what's going on for next time. All right, so here's how we're going to create stats_total2 with the number of students in the past 10 years. We're organizing them kind of like as a list, as a one-dimensional list. And to do that, we need to use the little function c. So when we're creating a vector, we use c, open parentheses, and we put the numbers in that sequence. And if you click here, you see that we created stats_total2, which is a vector that has one row and 10 columns of data. Okay, so it's one-dimensional. So we have the all numbers in one line. We call the set of numbers in parentheses that comes after C a vector, right? It has a one-dimensional data structure. Think of it as a line or column of data. All right, so exercise 7. So I apologize for the way this is worded here. Exercise 7, create a vector that includes your age when you started high school, your age when you started college, and your age when you started your current graduate education in math or whatever program you're in. Assign it to the variable educational milestone. Now again, I'll let you take a few minutes to try and do it. Please press pause because I'm not going to wait for the whole time, but I'll be silent for a bit. All right, let's try and solve this. So the name of the variable is educational milestones. And we need to assign this, we'll assign the ages to this variable. So we have the little assign signal. The function to create the vector is C. And now we need to put the ages there. So I will put my ages. When I entered high school, I was 14. I started college at 17. In my first graduate program back in Brazil, I was, I think, 24 when I got in. So here it is, 14, 17, 24. So you can see here on the workspace, the 3 ages that qualify my educational milestones. Now let's look at exercise 8. Create a vector that includes the names of your high school, university, or college where you completed your undergraduate education, university where you completed your current graduate education. So 3 institutions. Now, differently from what we had before, remember we had numerical variables, your age. But here, we're going to have another kind of variable. That's the names of the institutions. Those are characters. And remember, they come in square quotes. With that in mind, pause the video, try out the exercise, and come back for the solution. All right, let's do it. So we have to assign this new set of institutional names to educational. You see that if you start something that R already knows of, something in your workspace or a function that R has, it will help you. But we don't want educational milestones, we want educational institutions. Little assignment thingy. Now we do C, and I will say Federal University of Minas Gerais in Brazil. That's, oh no, well, my high school was Albert Einstein. That's the name of the school that I did my high school at. My undergrad education was at the Federal University of Minas Gerais in Brazil. and my PhD education was at UConn. My most recent one was at UConn. All right, so here it is. If I click, I have my educational institutions right there. And again, if you want to print it so you can see it in the document, just write the thing again. Now I can use institutions right there, and there they are. All right, so vectors is one form of organization of data that would be like one-dimensional, one line of data. You can imagine Excel files with one line of data or one column of data. Those are vectors. But we can also think of matrices, right? When you have multiple columns or multiple rows. Note that we can then also hold multidimensional data in matrices and data frames. We're just going to talk about matrices today, but really data frames is what you're going to work with most of the time because you're not going to be creating your data from scratch. I'm going to give you files that will save as data frames, which are real data with names in the columns and everything. For example, let's transform our vector stats total 2 into a 5-row 2-column matrix. Sorry, I should say 2-column 2-row data matrix. If we come here and we say I'll create stats total 3, but instead of having a function to create a vector, I have a function to create a matrix. And that function will take the numbers that are in the vector data stats 2. So let's find it here. Where is data stats 2? Did we create that? Stats 2. Oh, it's just stats 2. Data equals stats 2. It's that list of numbers, but I want to divide them up such that we have 5 different columns and 2 rows. So this one here. Okay, that's right there. We're going to tell R to take that as input. So we're naming our first argument. When we're naming our second argument, I want you to divide these 10 numbers in 2 different rows. So 5 columns, right, and 2 different rows. So here is what it would look like. Let's print it. So I ran it. So it's stats 3 is right there. And there you go. It created 2 rows. Because I had 10 numbers, to divide it into rows, you had to put 5 in each. You have to create 5 columns, right? So here's how the matrix function works. It takes as input a list of numbers, and you tell it in how many rows you want to organize them. But you have to have a way to divide them up equally. So for example, our vector had 10, our vector stats total 2 had 10 numbers. It's fine to organize it in 2 rows because if I divide 10 by 2, I have an integer. So we'll have 5 columns divided in 2 rows. So you have something like this. So another possibility here, because we have 10 numbers, is that we would be able to divide it in 5 rows because 10 divided by 5 is also an integer. So we can do that. Take a look. And now, see? Now we're dividing it into 5 different rows. But we couldn't do it in 3. A mistake would happen because, you know, data length 10 is not a submultiple or multiple of the number of rows 3. So let's keep it at 2 for now. All right, let's see how this can be useful. I will create a vector that includes both my ages and the institutions where I started each level of my education. And I will assign this vector to a variable called education information. So if I do that, I run it, I have education information here on the workspace. I will now run here to print. You can see how it's not very organized, right? Would be nice to have it in a 2-dimensional structure. You can imagine 3 rows, for instance, 1 for each education level of education, and 2 columns mapped to 2 pieces of information: your age, when you entered that level of education, and the institution where you got your education. Thankfully, it's possible to create a matrix to accomplish that, as we just saw. And you now have the skills to do it. Review the code I used to create a matrix up there, from a vector and try out exercise 9 below. What would it look like? So I need to create a variable called education information, right? And I will assign that to a matrix where I will use the vector that I just created, education information. So I asked you to assign to a variable education information 2, not to override the other one. I'll use the values in the variable education information. And I asked you to divide that in 3 rows. So let's do that. N rows, N row, I think it's N row, right? So I'll go back because I forgot the syntax. N row equal 3. If I run it, here's what if you run it, you won't see anything going on. You will just see that the education information 2 is up here. You can't print it down there, however, by typing education information 2. So it begins to look like a little data set, right? So it has high school, undergrad, and grad, and you have age in this column and the institution in this column. So finally, we can put some names to the columns and rows. Watch, row names, education information 2, and because each row represents a level of education, I'm creating a little vector, here's the C, with high school for the first row, undergraduate for the second, and graduate for the third. And now I can also create names for the column of the matrix education information 2, which is age at milestone and the institution. So if I do this, I'm creating, it's processed. I have row numbers and call numbers already saved. And now if I print education information 2, I will see the names here. High school, age at milestone 14, institution Albert Einstein. Sorry, I made it disappear. Undergraduate, I was 17, and I did at the Federal University of Minas Gerais, and graduate, I was 22 or 24, I can't remember, probably 24, and I did it at UConn. Cool, right? Our matrix now has names for rows and columns, and you just created and named a very simple data set, but a data set nonetheless. So that is it for this week. So you see that we took about an hour, more or less, to go through the guided activities. That's more or less the time that you should think in your head that you will take to go through the guided activity, right? So about an hour to go through them by yourself as well. Now we're going to do one last video to see what I do now that I'm done, right? So you did guided activity 1 and guided activity 2. Now what do I do to upload these, okay? To upload this to Canvas. I'll see you in a bit.